I walked into my own kitchen and heard, "She still thinks this house is hers." I let the deed answer. I was folding towels on a Tuesday morning, the good towels, the ones my mother gave me when I married 43 years ago. They were thin now and the edges were frayed, but I could not throw them away. I tried once and my daughter Lauren fished them out of the trash can. She said they smell like grandma, so I kept them. I folded them the way my mother taught me, in thirds, then in half again. The laundry room smelled like lavender detergent and the coffee was almost done brewing, and outside the sun was coming up over the fence line. It was a normal morning. That is what I keep telling myself. It was a normal morning before the world cracked open. I am 71 years old. My name is Margaret, but everyone calls me Maggie. I have 3 children and 6 grandchildren, and a husband named Frank who I married when I was 27 and he was 30, and we both had good teeth and good intentions. We built this life together. The house on Maple Drive, the 2 cars in the garage, the retirement accounts we added to every month even when money was tight, the camping trips to the lake where the kids learned to fish, the Thanksgivings with 20 people around the table and the folding chairs lined up against the wall. I gave everything to that life. I gave my body to childbirth 3 times. I gave my back to scrubbing floors, and my hands to cooking dinners, and my nights to worrying about fevers and broken bones, and report cards that came home with C's. I gave my youth to Frank. I gave my middle years to the children. And now I was in the last part, the part where you are supposed to sit back and watch the garden grow. But gardens lie. The pretty flowers hide the roots that rot underground. It started with small things, little cuts you barely feel until you realize you are bleeding out. Lauren stopped calling every morning. She used to call at 8:15 on her drive to work. We would talk about nothing. The weather, what she was making for dinner, some drama at the elementary school where she taught 2nd grade. Then the calls became every other day, then twice a week. Then she would text instead. "Sorry, Mom, crazy day, love you." I understood. She was busy. She had 2 boys and a husband and a job. I did not want to be the needy mother, so I stopped calling first. I waited, and the phone stayed quiet. My son Daniel was worse. Daniel lived 40 minutes away, in a town with a train station and expensive coffee shops. He married a woman named Krista who never liked me. I knew it from the first dinner. She looked at my cloth napkins like they were dirty. She looked at my casserole like it was poison. She smiled, but the smile never reached her eyes. Daniel used to come over every Sunday. He would bring the newspaper, and we would sit on the porch and he would tell me about his work in commercial real estate. Then Krista got pregnant and the Sunday visits stopped. Then they had the baby and I became the babysitter. I drove out to their house 3 days a week for 2 years. I changed diapers and fed bottles and rocked that little girl to sleep while Krista went to yoga or brunch or whatever young mothers did to stay sane. I did not mind. I loved that baby. I loved being needed. But then the baby grew up and started preschool, and Krista said they did not need me as much. Daniel stopped answering my texts. He would call back sometimes after 3 or 4 days, always with a reason. Work trip, sick kid, lost his phone. I believed him because he was my son and my son would not lie to me. Frank was the hardest to notice because Frank was always quiet. That was his way. He came home from work every night at 6:15. He ate whatever I put on the table. He watched the news and then a crime show and then went to bed at 10. We had not had a real conversation in years, not about anything that mattered. I would tell him something and he would nod, and then 5 minutes later he would ask me the same thing again because he was not listening. I told myself it was his age. His hearing was going, his attention was going. I told myself to be patient. He was a good man. He worked hard. He never hit me. He never yelled. He paid the bills. That was enough for a long time. Or I thought it was enough because I did not know what else to want. Then my sister Carolyn called me on a Thursday night and told me something I did not want to hear. Carolyn is 5 years younger than me, and she has always had a sharp tongue. She never married. She says she saw what marriage did to me and decided to keep her freedom. I used to think she was bitter. Now I think she was just honest. She said, "Maggie, have you looked at the deed to the house lately?" I said, "Why would I look at the deed?" She said, "Because Frank refinanced last year, and I heard from the bank teller when I deposited my check that your name is off the mortgage." I laughed. I said, "That is impossible. Frank would not do that without telling me. Carolyn said, okay, but check anyway. I said I would, but I did not. Not for 3 more weeks, because checking would mean I did not trust him, and I trusted Frank. That was my whole identity, the trusting wife, the patient mother, the grandmother who shows up. When I finally looked, I did it the way you do something you are ashamed of. I waited until Frank went to the hardware store. I went into his office. I opened the filing cabinet drawer that he always kept locked. The key was on his key ring, but he left it on the kitchen counter that day. I told myself I was just being curious. I was not suspicious. I was just curious. I opened the drawer, and there were the papers, the refinancing documents from May. I read them standing up in the bad light of that little room. My name was not on the mortgage. It was not on the deed either. The house was in Frank's name only. And there was a second document I did not understand, a quitclaim deed signed by me, dated last May, with a signature that looked like mine but was not mine. I stood there holding the paper. My hands did not shake. That was the strangest part. I thought my hands would shake, but they were steady. I felt cold. Not angry yet, just cold. Like someone had poured ice water down my back and I could not move. I heard the garage door open. Frank was home. I put the papers back in the drawer exactly the way I found them. I locked the drawer. I put the key back on the kitchen counter. I went to the living room and sat down and turned on the television. Frank came in with a bag of potting soil and asked me what I wanted for dinner. I said chicken. He said okay. He went to the bedroom to change his shirt. I sat there watching a commercial for life insurance, and I did not feel anything at all. That was the first crack. I did not know it yet, but that was the crack that would split the whole foundation. I did not confront him that night, or the next night, or the week after. I told myself I must have signed something without reading it. I told myself Frank would never steal my house. He was my husband. We had been married for over 40 years. The house was ours. That was the deal. We bought it together in 1983 for $87,000. I painted every room myself. I planted the roses by the front door. I raised 3 children under that roof. That house was more mine than anything in the world. But the paper said otherwise. The paper said I gave it away. I called my sister again. Carolyn said, you need a lawyer. I said, I do not want to make a big deal. She said, Maggie, they are stealing your house. I said, maybe it is a mistake. She said, it is not a mistake. She said, Frank is a liar and you have been covering for him for 40 years. I hung up on her. Then I cried for 20 minutes in the bathroom with the faucet running so Frank would not hear me. Then I dried my face and went back to the kitchen and started dinner because that was what I did. I cooked, I cleaned, I kept the machine running. The machine broke on a Sunday afternoon in October. The leaves were turning. The air smelled like wood smoke and wet pavement. My daughter Lauren came over with her 2 boys. They were 8 and 10, wild boys with dirty sneakers and loud voices. I loved them more than I knew how to say. They ran through my house like little tornadoes, and I let them, because a house should have children running through it. That is what I always believed. A quiet house is a sad house. Lauren was different that day. She was nervous. She kept looking at her phone. She would start a sentence and then stop. She asked me if I had talked to Daniel recently. I said, not for a few weeks. She said he wanted to come over next weekend. I said that would be nice. She said maybe we could all have dinner together. I said that would be very nice. But her voice was wrong. Her voice was too high. She was hiding something. I know my daughter. I changed her diapers. I taught her to ride a bike. I held her hand when she got her blood drawn at the doctor's office. I know when she is lying. But I did not push her, because pushing meant finding out something I did not want to know. The boys ran into the kitchen where I was making onion egg. They were fighting over a toy car. I got between them and told them to share or I would take the car away. They laughed and ran off to the living room. I heard Frank in the den watching football. I heard the announcer yelling about a touchdown. I heard the boys screaming and laughing. It sounded like a normal Sunday. It sounded like my life. But underneath it all, there was a hum, a low, ugly hum like a refrigerator about to die. Lauren came into the kitchen and closed the door behind her. She leaned against the counter. She looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It was not guilt exactly. It was something worse. It was pity. She said, Mom, I need to tell you something. I said, okay. She said, Dad is going to talk to you tonight. I said, about what? She looked down at the floor. She said, about the house. My stomach dropped. I set down the pitcher of lemonade. I said, what about the house? She said he is going to sell it. He and Daniel and Krista have been planning it for a year. They are going to sell the house and move into a condo in Florida, and you are going to go to a retirement home, the one on Fletcher Road. I did not say anything for a long time. The lemonade was sweating on the counter. The ice cubes were melting. I could hear the boys laughing in the other room. Frank yelled something at the television. The sun was coming through the window and hitting the soap dispenser and making a rainbow on the wall. I noticed all of these things because my brain was trying to find something normal to hold on to, something that was not what Lauren just said. A retirement home, the one on Fletcher Road. I knew that place. I visited a friend there once. It smelled like boiled vegetables and urine. The residents sat in wheelchairs in the hallway, staring at nothing. The windows had bars on them, not because it was a prison, because they were afraid the old people would wander out into traffic. I said, why would they send me there? Monin started crying. She said, Mom, they have been planning it since last spring. Dad signed a contract with a realtor. Daniel is going to manage the sale. Krista has been helping him clean out the attic. They already sold your china cabinet to a neighbor. They already threw away your mother's wedding dress. I found it in the trash last month. I took it to my house. I did not tell you because I did not want to hurt you. The china cabinet.
My mother's china cabinet. The one she brought from the old house in Erie. The one I sat under as a little girl during thunderstorms. That was gone. Thrown away. Sold to a neighbor like a piece of furniture from a garage sale. I felt something break inside me. Not a bone, not a vessel. Something softer, something deeper. The part of me that believed I was loved. I asked Lauren if she knew about the quitclaim deed. She nodded. She said, Dad told me. He said you signed it willingly. He said you wanted to take your name off the house because of taxes. I said I never signed anything. Lauren said, I know, Mom. I saw the signature. It was not yours. Krista signed it. She practiced your signature for a week. Daniel told me. He was drunk at a party and he told me. He said Mom would never know. He said by the time she finds out it will be too late. My son. My firstborn. The baby I held in my arms for 12 hours before they gave him a name. The little boy who ran to me with scraped knees and nightmares and questions about why the sky was blue. That boy helped his wife forge my signature. That boy planned to sell my house and put me in a home. That boy was waiting for me to die so he could take what was left. I walked out of the kitchen. I walked past the boys who were now building a fort out of couch cushions. I walked past the den where Frank was watching his game. I walked into the bedroom and closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed. I did not cry. I did not scream.
I just sat there. The room was quiet, except for the clock on the nightstand. Tick, tick, tick. The same clock that sat there for 43 years. The same clock that ticked while I gave birth, and while I nursed fevers, and while I cried over my father's funeral, and while I watched my children graduate and get married and have children of their own. Tick, tick, tick. The sound of time passing, the sound of a life being erased. Frank came in at halftime. He stood in the doorway. He had the face he always had when he wanted to tell me something he knew I would not like. The same face he had when he told me he lost money on that investment in the 90s. The same face he had when he told me his mother could not come to Thanksgiving because she was drinking again. He said, Maggie, Lauren told you. I said, yes. He said, it is for the best. I said, what is for the best? He said, the house is too much for us. The stairs are hard on your knees. The yard is too big. We need to downsize. I said, you mean you need to downsize? He said, what? I said, you are not moving to Florida with me, Frank. You are moving to Florida without me. I am going to Fletcher Road. He did not deny it. He just looked at the floor. He said, the retirement home is very nice. It has activities. You will make friends. I stood up. I am 63 years old, I said. I am not ready for a retirement home. He said, you are 71. I said, I am 63 in my mind, and that is what matters.
He said, Maggie, please do not make this difficult. Difficult. He asked me not to make it difficult. After forging my signature, after stealing my house, after planning to put me away like a dog that cannot be house-trained anymore. He asked me not to make it difficult. I looked at this man I slept next to for 43 years, this man whose coffee I made every morning, this man whose mother I nursed through cancer while he worked late, this man who held my hand when the doctor said my thyroid was bad and I might need surgery. I looked at him, and I did not recognize him. He was a stranger wearing my husband's face. I said, I am not going to Fletcher Road. He said, you do not have a choice. I said, I have a lawyer. He laughed. That is when I knew for sure. He laughed. He said, "What lawyer are you going to hire with what money?" I said, "I have money." He said, "You have $2,000 in your savings account. I transferred the rest to our joint account last year. You remember, you signed the form." I did not sign any form, but I remembered something. A day last winter, Krista came over with a clipboard. She said it was a new health insurance form. She said the state required it for seniors. She said, "Just sign here, Mom," and I signed. Because she was my daughter-in-law, because I trusted her, because I was old and tired and I did not read the fine print anymore. That was my sin, my only sin. I trusted people who did not deserve trust. The room started to spin.
I sat back down on the bed. Frank left. He went back to his football game. I heard him laugh at something on the television. I heard the boys screaming. I heard Lauren crying in the kitchen. And I heard nothing else. Just the clock. Tick, tick, tick. The sound of a woman realizing she has been a fool for 43 years. I called Carolyn that night after everyone left. I told her everything. She said, "I told you so." I said, "I know." She said, "Do not give up." I said, "I have no money and no lawyer and no house." She said, "You have me." She said, "I have $10,000 in my emergency fund. It is yours. Take it." I said, "I cannot take your money." She said, "You are not taking it. I am giving it. And you are going to fight. You are going to take back what is yours, or you are going to die trying." That was my sister. The one I thought was bitter. The one who never married. The one who saved my life. The lawyer I found was a woman named Diane. She was 52 years old and divorced, and wore pantsuits that did not fit well, but her eyes were sharp. I met her in a strip mall office next to a Pizza Hut. The carpet was brown and the chairs were plastic, and the whole place smelled like pepperoni. But Diane listened. She listened for an hour while I told her everything. The quitclaim deed, the forged signature, the health insurance form that was really a bank transfer, the plan to sell my house and put me in a home. She took notes on a yellow legal pad. She did not interrupt. She did not tell me I was crazy. When I finished, she put down her pen and she said, "Mrs. Harris, they have committed multiple felonies: forgery, financial elder abuse, fraud. We are going to destroy them." I started to cry, real crying, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and dark and does not stop until you are empty. Diane handed me a box of tissues. She did not say it would be okay. She just let me cry. That was the first time I felt like someone was on my side, not because I paid them, because they believed me. The next 6 months were a war, a quiet war, fought in lawyers' offices and courtrooms and the cold hallways of the county courthouse. Frank moved out of the bedroom and into the guest room. We did not speak except through Diane. The children took sides. Lauren was with me, Daniel was with Frank. Krista refused to return my calls. The grandchildren were confused. The 8-year-old asked me why I did not come to his birthday party. I said I was not invited. He said, "Mommy said you were sick." I said, "I am sick, sweetheart. I am sick of being lied to." The court date was set for March, a cold March with gray skies and sleet that turned to rain, then back to sleet. I wore my best dress, a navy blue one with white flowers that Frank bought me for our 30th anniversary. I wore it because I wanted him to see me, to really see me, one last time. The courtroom was small, and the benches were hard, and the judge was a woman, about my age, with gray hair and reading glasses on a chain. She looked tired. She looked like she had seen 1,000 families tear themselves apart. She looked at me, and she looked at Frank, and she looked at the stack of papers on her desk, and she sighed. Frank's lawyer was a young man in an expensive suit. He argued that I signed the quitclaim deed willingly. He argued that I had memory problems. He argued that Frank was acting in my best interest because I could not take care of myself anymore. He said, "Mrs. Harris forgets things. She leaves the stove on. She loses her keys. She is not capable of managing her own affairs." I wanted to scream. I do not leave the stove on. I lose my keys because I have 6 grandchildren who move them when they visit. But I did not scream. Diane told me to stay calm. Diane told me the truth would come out. And it did. Diane brought in a handwriting expert, a thin man with a mustache who spent 40 minutes comparing the signature on the quitclaim deed to my actual signature from my driver's license and my passport and my social security card. He testified under oath that the signature was a forgery. He said the person who signed it had practiced, but not enough. The pressure was wrong. The slant was wrong. The loop on the M was too tight. Krista had signed my name, and she had done it wrong. Diane also brought in bank records, the transfer of my savings,
The forged health insurance form. She showed the judge that Frank had opened a separate account in Florida with $60,000, money that came from the equity in our house, money that I never knew existed, money that was half mine. Frank did not look at me the whole time. He stared at the table in front of him. His hands were folded. His wedding ring caught the light. He still wore it. That made me angrier than anything else. He still wore the ring, as if he had any right to it. The judge took a week to decide. A week of silence, a week of waiting by the phone, a week of Carolyn bringing me soup and holding my hand and telling me it would be okay, even though we both knew it might not be. A week of Frank staying in the guest room, a week of the house feeling like a tomb, a week of me walking through rooms I had painted and cleaned and loved and realizing they were never really mine. They were always his. He just let me think they were mine. The judge ruled on a Friday afternoon. Diane called me at 3:47. I remember the time because the clock on the wall said 3:47, and I had been staring at it for an hour. Diane said we won. She said the judge voided the quitclaim deed. She said the house is back in both names. She said Frank has to return the money he transferred. She said he has to pay your legal fees. She said he cannot sell the house without your signature. She said you are not going to Fletcher Road. I sat down on the floor of the living room, right there on the carpet I had vacuumed 1,000 times, the carpet where my children learned to crawl. I sat down and I put my head in my hands and I sobbed. Not happy crying, not sad crying, something in between. The sound of a woman who had won. Found it the next morning, next to the coffee maker. I picked it up. It was still warm from the sun coming through the window. I put it in my pocket. I still have it. I do not know why. Lauren comes over every Sunday now. She brings the boys. They are louder than ever. They eat my food and break my things, and I love them more than I can say. Daniel does not come. He called me once, 6 months after the court case. He said, "Mom, I am sorry." I said, "I know." He said, "Krista made me do it." I said, "No. You are a grown man. You made choices." He said, "I want to see you." I said, "I want to see you too, but not her. Never her." He said, "Okay." He has not called again. Frank lives in Florida now, in a condo near the beach. I get a postcard sometimes. The weather is always nice. The ocean is always blue. He signs them, "Love, Frank." Love? After everything, he still writes love. I keep the postcards in a drawer. I do not know why I keep them. Maybe because I want to remember that I was married once, that I had a husband. That I was not always alone. I am still in the house on Maple Drive. I wake up every morning and make coffee and fold the took towels, the ones my mother gave me, the ones Lauren saved from the trash. I plant new roses every spring. I paint the rooms when the old paint starts to peel. I keep the machine running. That is what I do. I keep the machine running. But something is different now. The house feels bigger, emptier. The walls have seen things. The floors have heard things. I sit on the porch some evenings and watch the sun go down, and I think about trust, about how it takes a lifetime to build and a moment to destroy, about how the people you love the most are the ones who can hurt you the worst, about how I spent 71 years being a mother and a wife and a grandmother, and in the end, that did not protect me. That made me a target. I am not bitter. I do not have the energy for bitter. I am just tired. Tired in a way that sleep does not fix. Tired in a way that lives in your bones. I still go to church on Sundays. I still bake cookies for the neighbors. I still smile when the boys come over and knock over my lamp for the 100th time. I still live. That is what I do. I live. But I live differently now.
I lock my filing cabinet. I check my bank accounts every morning. I read every document before I sign. I trust no one. Not completely. Not anymore. The clock is still on the nightstand. Tick, tick, tick. The same clock. The same sound. Time passing. Life moving.
I am 71 years old, and I am starting over. That is the part no one tells you about. The starting over. The rebuilding. The learning to stand alone after 43 years of leaning on someone who was never really there. I am not sad, not most days. I am here. That is enough. That has to be enough. My daughter asked me last week if I forgave him, Frank. I thought about it. I thought about the kitchen, the lemonade, the rainbow on the wall, the sound of Lauren's voice when she told me the truth, the sound of Frank laughing. I said I do not know if forgiveness is the right word. I said I am not angry anymore, but I am not whole either. I am something else, something in between. A woman with a house and a clock, and a drawer full of postcards from a man who tried to erase her. Lauren said, "That is okay, Mom. You do not have to be whole. You just have to be here." So I am here, on Maple Drive, in the house I fought for, in the life I rebuilt with my own 2 hands. The good towels are in the linen closet. The coffee is brewing. The roses are blooming. And somewhere in Florida, my husband is watching the ocean and signing his name to postcards he probably does not mean. Tick, tick, tick. The sound of a woman who survived.